I'm here to talk to you about strategic vision to delivery, how to break down work effectively. I'm hoping that you've brought situations from your work environments that you have that are big, gnarly, challenging problems that you want to break down. I actually have handouts that I think somebody's looking to get more because we printed out 100 and I think we have more than 100 folks in here. So we might have to share, but for you to start writing down some of those strategic items that you want to work on and start breaking them down. We'll do an exercise at the end to go through it as well. Speaking of gnarly, challenging problems, the IRS. Last fall, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, which allocated $80 billion to the IRS. That's 80 with a B, billion dollars to the IRS. The purpose for that money, and I'm going to try to be as concise as possible with this, was to help the IRS to stop sucking so bad. $15 million was allocated just to come up with an approach. $15 million to come up with an approach for how to spend $80 billion to stop sucking. That's a lot of money just to come up with an approach. And it occurred to me, actually, recently, so I had redone a lot of this presentation, that's exactly what I'm talking about here, is how do you take a very challenging initiative, an $80 billion sized initiative, and turn it into something that can actually be done by people that do the work. And so let's help the IRS today, and maybe we can save them $15 million and come up with something that's a good approach for spending $80 billion for free. What do you guys think? Does that sound good? All right, before we jump into that, a little bit about myself. I graduated from Iowa State University in 2001. Yeah, go State. Somebody's here. All right. Packed up all my things into my Subaru Forester and drove out to Sacramento, California, where I started working for Accenture, where I was part of large teams implementing very big, very complex system transformation projects for the state of California. These were all executed with waterfall methodology, big teams, big project plans, large PMOs, big bang releases, large conversions. So if there's anything that I have deep expertise in, it's delivering waterfall projects, which I'm guessing is what you're all hoping for from your Agile 2023 presenters. My first introduction to the world of Agile came in 2012 when Accenture decided to take some of the software that we'd built for California, repackaged it, and sold it to the state of Iowa as a product to help meet some Affordable Care Act deadlines. This contract was written as a quote-unquote Agile contract, and all the key personnel, which included me, was required to go to Scrum Master training, which was really interesting because we had these these Accenture senior managers that had been doing traditional waterfall. We had this contract that was supposed to be Agile, but it wasn't, and our instructor, I remember the guy, his name was Bob Schatz. He looked at us and he was receiving all of this information, and he was like, "You guys are going to fail." So wherever Bob is, he's so right. We actually did get the Affordable Care Act requirements met by the deadline, so maybe you could consider that a success. But we spent all the money in the budget, used all the timeline, and we were about 15% done. So that was really fun for us. And after trying to salvage that relationship for several months, I made the decision to go off and start my own independent practice where I continued to learn about the practices of Agile, eventually pivoting to more of a learning mindset and leaning into the behaviors, values, principles, and applying those, which is hopefully what you'll see represented in this presentation today. Throughout my very different experiences, there are a couple things that were very consistent in those, that I was working on very major transformational work, and it was being done in more bureaucratic environments. In those environments, one thing that I noticed is that when we applied the practices of Agile without the corresponding mindset, the behaviors, the values, the results were extremely poor, much worse than the waterfall delivery methods that I had observed and the results we saw there. However, when the converse was true, when we applied the mindset of Agile, the behaviors, the values, even without any of the practices, not a sprint to be found or a Kanban board to be seen, the results were phenomenal, better than had been delivered historically in many of these organizations. And what's occurred to me as I've continued to engage with Agile discussion groups and forums is that my experience is not at all unique. Everywhere I go, I find people that are banging their heads against the wall in this sad face space, right? Does anyone out there self-identify as working in sad face? A couple people. Yeah, I see you. And this is really what I've dedicated the last 4 to 5 years of my career exploring, is how do we take these sad face spaces and turn them into happy face ones. And one of the key findings of that thinking is the exact topic that I'll be speaking to you about today, which is figuring out the best way to break down strategic work and goals into team deliverable items. And I'll be diving into that, but let's see. Oh, when I heard that this presentation was accepted, I was really excited. I got to work building a PowerPoint presentation, gathering all my data, putting all my facts together, building models and explanations and just text. I had over 100 pages of PowerPoint presentation content to share with you all today. I did make the smart decision of doing a trial run of my presentation. I gathered some people that I trusted to give me some feedback and ran through it. And by ran, I mean it. I had to go about as fast as possible just to get through all of my detailed content that I wanted to explain. And I got amazing feedback, and it was crystallized very well by feedback by one of my good friends, William, who, and just some background on William, he's probably one of the most empathetic, compassionate people that I know. And his feedback went something like this, and I'm being William now. Oh, hey, you know, I feel really bad. It's been a while, and I've just been really busy at work, and I haven't had a chance to get back to you. And I was like, hey, it's been like a day, right? It's okay, you know, I didn't give you a deadline. You're just doing this to help me. What'd you think, man? And William was like, oh, so great. So much rich information, so detailed. I learned a ton. I mean, there's more information than any human person could absorb in an hour, but, you know, so informational and amazing. I was like, oh, it sounds like you liked it. Cool. Was there anything that you would suggest I do differently? And he was like, you know, one question I had, if you were to distill your presentation down to just one key message, just one key idea, what would that be? And I was like, well, I thought that was clear in there. The whole point of what I'm talking about, strategic vision to delivery, that we need to do is to do less, is to maximize work not done. Agile principle 10, you know, don't do everything everywhere all at once. He's like, yeah, I see it now. It was just kind of buried among all the other things that you're talking about. Just spitballing here, one just tiny suggestion. What if you applied the key message of your presentation to your presentation? This guy, William, smart. Message received. So I did jettison 80% of the content that I'd put together, leaned into that IRS example that I explained earlier, and got rid of a lot of the meandering learning objectives that I'd come up with. And so if you're here because you read the learning objectives and I don't cover them, just come up, talk to me afterwards. I got a 100-page PowerPoint presentation. We can go through it and hit those. And boiled down the core message of what I'm here to talk to you about today to do less. Figure out ways to do less. And by do less, I'm not talking about, as a database administrator, I need to refresh the database so the developers can continue developing. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not even talking about, as a user, I need to log into the application so that I can access my records. That's not what I'm referring to either when I say do less. What I'm talking about is finding the smallest slice of strategic goal that can be broken down and actioned by a team to be delivering value in alignment with that goal. That's what I mean by do less. And some of you are probably thinking, well, duh, dummy, this is what Agile is. So we know this, right? And that's why you see that other image on this slide, which is a small glass of cucumber water, which I understand won't make tons of sense quite yet. What I find, especially in the environments that I've delivered in, is that we're not in this room. We're not in a room of people that understand that do less is a smart way to move forward with work. And there are many people that think the opposite. And so figuring out a way to apply this concept and the surrounding principles to get alignment on starting with do less is such a core fundamental thing that needs to be solved. A second concept that will apply in this presentation is figuring out how to create those protected small groups of people, which is what I'm referring to with small glasses of cucumber water, in order to drive that systemic change. So if you take one thing away from this presentation, I'm hoping that it's figuring out ways to do less. And if you take two things away, figuring out ways to do less to create small glasses of cucumber water. To give you an idea of the rest of the flow of what we'll be doing here today, I'd like to start out by getting to know you all a little bit better. So I've got some questions. If you want to grab your phones and take a snap of that QR code, you'll get into the system that'll show up again. So if you miss it, no worries. Learn about our group, learn about the things that you're working on and what you're focused on doing. And then I'll start digging into that IRS example that I introduced in the beginning and start to apply some of the principles and concepts around this do less idea, around this cucumber water idea, and how those could be applied to what the IRS is trying to achieve. And once we've done that, we'll give you all some time to try to apply those practices to the scenarios you brought from your work environments and hopefully have some discussion on that, but it's a big group, so that's going to be tough. All right, so the first question I've got, what would you say you do here? And by that, I'm talking about the strategic objective that you have brought that you would like to break down. If you do have a worksheet in front of you, there's a line on there for entering this information as well. All right, and this is mainly for you just to see what everybody else is doing. I'm not going to dig into these quite yet. All right, I hope it's okay if I keep going. That you can keep filling out the question. It'll let you move on if you haven't quite entered yet. The next question on my list is, you won't be able to answer this until I flip to the next screen, but how would you categorize the work that you do? Are you doing something that's maintaining an existing stable product or set of business functions and maintaining and enhancing that, main goal being to drive an outcome from the existing technology and business functions that you use, so business operations? Or are you doing something that's more, and I saw a bunch of these on there, system modernization. Maybe you're doing a cloud transformation where you're migrating on-premise technology to the cloud, but not doing a whole lot in terms of transforming business functions. Are you, oops, that was the third one, sorry. The second one, are you doing organizational change? Are you something like an Agile transformation where you've got people that are working in one set of ways of working and your goal, your strategic objective is to shift them to different ways of working? The fourth one, business IT transformation. So something more along the lines of the IRS example that I explained initially. You're really fundamentally changing how you serve customers and you're replacing an existing method of serving those customers with something totally different. Or you might be doing new product development, something more greenfield like a startup, or you're building something out that doesn't have existing technology or business process support for it. It's brand new. All right, so with those options in mind, oh, and I did give you another. So if this doesn't match something that you're doing, you can enter that other choice as well. Well, maybe other. Wow, that's pretty even. Does anyone that's entered other care to share what that is? Say that again? Oh, that's all of the above? Okay. Doing all those things. Yeah, anyone else? Enablement. Say more about that. Okay, getting out of the way. Anything else besides those two? All right, a lot of transformation here. All right, that fits in well with what I'm talking about. And I would say that if you're the farther you go to the right, I guess with excluding the other category on this picture, likely going to be a little bit less relevant to your situations. What I'm talking about is mostly applicable to situations where we are implementing change. We're transforming something that exists today, and we're resulting that requires people to shift how they think about something, which is probably needed in business operations and new product development, just not as change focused as some of the middle options. All right, the next question is around your organizational culture that you work in. And I like the Western model for this, which defines 3 typologies for expressing or defining what organizational culture you have: pathological or power-oriented, bureaucratic or rule-oriented, and then generative or outcome-oriented. And Western provides 6 questions that are useful for trying to determine which one of those categories you fit into. There's the level of collaboration, which is basically low to high from pathological to generative. The way leaders respond to bad news. In a pathological environment, we shoot the messenger. In a bureaucratic environment, we ignore the messenger and go on with our business. And in a generative environment, we encourage the messenger to continue bringing us bad news, and we train them on how to do it more often and better. From an addressing risk standpoint, in a pathological environment, we ignore them. In a bureaucratic environment, we assign them to owners. We create a risk log, we manage that log, and we have those owners follow up on it. And in a generative environment, we share them amongst teams. When it comes to cross-functional integration and bridging, in a pathological environment, we discourage it. We don't want people talking to others outside of their silo. In a bureaucratic environment, we tolerate it, but we like the comfort of those silo walls. And in a generative environment, we want to encourage it, let everybody cross-functionally integrate. When it comes to failure in a pathological environment, we seek blame when that happens. In a bureaucratic environment, we seek justice. And in a pathological environment, we seek learning and how we can do it better the next time. And then when it comes to novelty, in a pathological environment, we crush it. In a bureaucratic environment, when it happens, it creates issues, and like whack-a-mole pops up in different places. And in a generative environment, we adopt it and implement it. So thinking of those 6 criteria and the organizations you work within, similar question to respond to. I did give you options in the middle if you're like, I'm kind of in between, and choose those. Oh, people are working in some good places. And you can see I've cross-sectioned this with your previous answers as well, so you can see what the categorization of work and how that fits into the answers as well. I guess I was hoping for more of a middle finger distribution on this one. Again, the applicability of what I'm about to talk to is probably more relevant in the center of this picture. If you're in a pathological organization, there's likely not much you can do or much we can help with that's going to take you out of sad face. That's likely where you're going to be. Best option for you if you're, did we go back? Yeah. If you're one of those 9 people, is maybe look for something else to work on. I think this is still a good place to be, because you'll probably land somewhere else when you get that new job, and you'll want to understand these principles. Conversely, on the generative side, you're likely in a place where you don't need this information as much. That there's support and encouragement for whatever it is you're doing. The breaking it down to do less is already probably something embedded in your culture already. All right, so that we've learned about ourselves, what we're doing, the strategic initiatives we're working on, and what our cultures are all about. Let's move on to the IRS example and the principles. Some details about the IRS, and I think most of us know this, but the main purpose of the organization is to collect tax revenue from our tax base, from our citizens. As of last year, the IRS collected around $4.5 trillion in taxes. They estimated that it would have been about $5 trillion if it weren't for fraudulent actors, people that avoided taxes, or possibly people who just didn't know and didn't know what to submit and didn't pay. So $500 billion out there that we really could have collected in the prior year if it weren't for some of those situations. We're collecting money from around 335 million citizens, and I didn't get the number on the number of business filings there were, but also a lot. The IRS employs around 80,000 staff, of which 70,000 of those people are IT staff, which you might be thinking, what are those IT staff doing with very little digital presence? I think we all know there's not much you can do as a citizen to engage with the IRS using IT. So it's mostly back office stuff. And I think there's a book that came out this summer called Recoding America, How Government is Failing Us in the Digital Age and How We Can Do Better, by Jennifer Palka. She explains very well what these 7,000 people are likely doing. And she uses an analogy of an archaeological dig site, where in some of these environments that have policy changes over time, we see these bottom layers being built in with systems and support that are needed, and then policy changes that don't consider those, continuing to just stratify and pave over each layer, leaving buried bodies and technology that are still being used to support current operations, which creates a very challenging, messy environment that becomes really tough to unwind and modernize. So what should we do? How should we spend that $15 million or not spend that $15 million in order to come up with an approach? And similarly, I got some questions here and another option. Should we go build out a 5-year strategic plan? We got $15 million. Let's spend that time and that money thinking about all the steps that we need to take, having discussions with people, coming up with milestones, assigning budget to those, assigning project management to make sure we manage all the dependencies, create a typical 5-year strategic plan. Should we institute a agile transformation? Should we start by recognizing the fact that there's 80,000 people here that probably are working in ways that are not going to be conducive to what we need to change to, and let's work on changing those people? Should we perform an enterprise architectural analysis? Should we do that archaeological dig, start tagging and bagging some of those fossils that are in there and documenting what they look like? Or should we launch an outcome-focused empowered team that does exploration and starts to look at an outcome and discover what's in that archaeological layers of sediment by trying things and experimenting? And I get that all is probably an option you want to give on this one too. There may be something you want to do of all of these, but I'm looking for your favorite choice here, the optimal thing you'd choose. Or if there's something totally different, that's your other choice. Any of the others want to say what that is? Guess we just have one. Yeah? Buy a product? Is that what that was? I don't know what that is, but it sounds great. Okay. Okay. Buy existing product and use that to inform what we do with the 80 billion. Or you're just saying use the 80 billion to buy that? All right. All right. Got a new option. All right. Well, it looks like most people are on outcome-focused empowered team, probably because they know what I'm here to talk about. Pretty even on the other options. That's interesting. All right, so for the folks of you that aren't in the 15, I've got some good news, I've got some bad news, and I've got some worse news. I'll start with the bad news, which is I lied to you about being able to save the $15 million. That money's already been spent, the approach has been delivered, and it's complete. Money's gone, so $15 million not coming back. The worst news is they chose the 5-year strategic plan option. Of course, right? 150-page document, so that's $100,000 a page for those that do math. That's not me, I'd have Dustin tell me. Here's what the math is on that, thank you. 5 strategic objectives, 42 different initiatives, 195 projects, 199 milestones, about 1 billion dependencies. There's like a whole 2 pages of just like mapping dependencies. I couldn't even figure it out. 5-year strategic plan. I was actually walking through this with one of my friends back in Iowa who's a pharmacist, doesn't do anything with Agile. And he was like, why would they do that? That's like the worst possible. I'm like, I don't know. The good news is there are starting to become some places in the United States government that do this, that are interested in more discovery, more exploration, more outcome focus. United States Digital Services, they've got people that are aligned to trying to move this forward. And I also have, crossed my fingers, one of these strategic initiatives in that 42 initiative plan is to explore direct file, which might maybe be something that's aligned with what I'm here to talk to you guys about. So that's really the next step, is let's talk about some of the principles that I've found have been successful in doing this, in creating an effective delivery environment for an outcome-focused team. And there are 8 principles that I've been working through, and as I've been thinking through this: prioritize safety, lead with vision, focus on outcomes, do less, which is the headliner, do it sooner, do it better, do it together, learn and repeat. Prioritize safety, that's all about ensuring that everyone in the organization feels safe to take interpersonal risk, to ask questions, to challenge the direction if it's not aligned with the vision, without fear of retaliation or something coming back on them. Psychological safety. Lead with vision, creating a compelling picture of a better future with such clarity that people in the organization can make day-to-day decisions without large management structures or people telling them what to do, micromanaging them, and can be aligned into that vision. Focus on outcomes is all about shifting how we ask for work that we want. And this is something that I think I struggle with, everyone struggles with. When I want something from someone, I tell them what I want from them and how to do it. I tell them the solution, and I ask them to go create that solution. That's pretty typical at all levels of organizations. You see that behavior manifesting. Focus on outcomes is an attempt to flip that and communicate what we want in terms of the results that we want to see, in terms of the success criteria. What would it look like if this was done well? And then giving the empowerment to people that need to do that work to decide what it is that's needed to accomplish that and how to go about doing it. Do less, we've already talked about, which is creating that small piece of strategic goal that can be manifested at a delivery team level. Do it sooner, do it better, do it together, and learn. I mean, these are Agile basics. I don't need to lecture you guys on these concepts. The one key piece of this that's relevant in these principles is the alignment to the outcome. So do it sooner is not just about getting to production sooner, which is important and great, but also sooner to get to that result that we've described in the outcome that we're focused on. And do it better, not only having a definition of done that includes repeatability, quality, the effectiveness, but also includes, did we achieve the result when we finish the work? Do it together, including all of the people that are needed to achieve the outcome in the work, which includes people beyond the IT organization. This includes end users, and it includes business folks that would need to participate in order to accomplish the outcome. And learn and repeat, not only having a retrospective about how we can interact better, about how we can have better meetings and how we can facilitate more effective work, also having a key part of that learning discussion being a focus on the measurements that describe the outcome we want to achieve, and thinking about how can we do that more effectively. 3 of these are specific to the content that I'm presenting today, which is around leading with vision, focusing on outcomes, doing less, strategic vision to delivery. And you might be thinking to yourselves, well, I don't have much control over these 3 areas, or the first 2 at least. I don't set the vision for the organization. I'm not someone that's defining the outcomes. Someone creates a solution and they give it to me and my teams, and I just have to execute, right? I have very little ability to change this. And this is where the small glasses of cucumber concept comes into play. And the principle that I really love that explains this, that inspires the cucumber water analogy, is the Prescott pickle principle from Jerry Weinberg, that cucumbers get pickled more than brine gets cucumbered. I think that's just a great way to describe the forcefulness and the impact of cultures on the people that work within organizations. In other words, people attempting to drive change in those organizations will often become assimilated and start to exhibit the behaviors of the cultural norms in those organizations much faster than driving significant change to the culture itself. The only way I've found to combat this, and there are likely other ways that have been successful, is to create very protected teams of people that have that focus on an outcome, a small glass of cucumber, if you will, and allow them to demonstrate the ability to achieve that outcome successfully, which gains buy-in and the ability to continue to scale and create more and more glasses of cucumber water, eventually filling up the vat and allowing there to be no more space for brine, right? Changing the culture, a cucumber water glass at a time. And if you layer those 2 concepts on top of each other, the Prescott pickle principle and those 8 principles I just talked about, I think the picture looks something like this. You've got brine influence principles on one side, safety, vision, outcomes. You've got some more team influence principles on the other side, together better sooner. Less is really that keystone block that holds these 2 pieces together and allows us to bridge between the 2. I do think there's one more prerequisite here, is that we need at least one leader that's willing to be courageous to support a cucumber water team in the first place. I wouldn't say you need to do a full transformation and discussion with the executive team to get everybody to have buy-in. You need at a minimum one person that's willing to say, I'm willing to experiment. I'm willing to keep you safe in this experiment that we're doing. So let's go do it, and I'll make sure that there's no brine that gets into your cucumber water as you're moving forward. All right, so let's take these principles and let's apply it to the IRS example. Now what you're looking at, this is very, very busy, right? This is my attempt at taking 150 pages and turning it into 1 page, which wasn't part of the report, actually, so I had to go and read the whole thing and dig all these pieces out and put them on one spot. But basically, here's all the initiatives with the time scale, with budget associated in terms of how it was laid out. And to be fair, it's not all that terrible. The first 3 of these, the purple, red, and blue, are outcome-focused activities, improving our services to taxpayers resolving their issues faster, going after that $500 billion in additional income we could get each year. They start to lose me on the bottom 2 a little bit, just with technology transformation being its own silo. When that's not aligned with some sort of specific outcome, it often results, and I see this happening all the time. We're going to go build a data warehouse. Okay, why? What's it for? If it's not aligned to the outcomes that we want to achieve, it often can result in spending a whole lot of money in creating something that's doing the same thing that was happening previously. And the last one's more around organizational change, retaining and having more engaged staff. All right, so, and one thing that was missing almost entirely from that report was an acknowledgement of the archaeological dig site we're about to go unearth. So something that's so important to consider when we're doing this work is the current state, the current environment, meeting people where they're at, understanding the level of complexity that we're dealing with in terms of how we need to transform this to something new. And when we apply the vision, outcomes, and less concepts to this, and I actually just took the vision and outcomes and came up with a high-level summary, again, basically by reading the document and coming up with it. They did a pretty decent job, at least, of articulating it in 150 pages. Would have been nice if they made something more concise. But what I came up with is creating a simple world-class user experience for taxpayers that effectively collects all taxes due equitably and in the best interest of US citizens with minimal effort from taxpayers and IRS support staff. The reason that's in red is that you could read about the different places where the vision included a desire to have equity in our tax system, a desire to advance our national interests through incentives like clean energy and national security. But then when they manifested it into the plan, those pieces were missing. So I think it's important to include in the vision all the pieces that you're actually trying to accomplish as part of your goals, and then manifest it in the plan as well. Kind of similar deal on the outcomes. The first three very clearly in the plan. The last two, equity and driving national interests, non-existent. So the key question is, and as I mentioned in the beginning, like the basis of what I'm here to talk to you about today is how do we get to less? I've spent a lot of time speaking around less, right? And there's a reason I haven't been spending all my time just talking about how do we do less. And that's because it's very simple. The biggest challenge is actually getting to the point that people agree to do it. There are 3 different methods that I've listed here of how to accomplish doing less. Using an outcomes hierarchy, so a strategic framework of nested outcomes, breaking your outcomes down to sub-components, down lower and lower. Scope segmentation, so using reference data or different criteria to segment the different scope you have. And minimum viable product, which I think everybody here has heard that word before, but coming up with a minimum experiment to test your solution hypothesis, your outcome hypothesis. So let's apply these to the strategic plan. I've laid out the 5 outcomes on the top. You can see how you can start breaking these down. I'm not going to read them out, but let's just take taxpayer experience. We might say that we can improve taxpayer experience by reducing taxpayer effort. We could also increase taxpayer experience by improving the support. 2 outcomes that were in the plan itself. We could further break that down to say, all right, well, I'm reducing taxpayer effort. I could focus on the quarterly filing and make that easier and more simple for people. I could focus on annual filing, which again, hopefully, fingers crossed, is something that the IRS is exploring in this manner. How do we make that more efficient for taxpayers? I could then apply scope segmentation to this. And a good way to think about this is, let's say we take a spreadsheet and we put all 335 million people in there as rows, and then we start listing out all the criteria of those people. We might say, okay, income range is 0 to 25, okay, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, on and on. We could say, how do we identify these people? Some people have passports. They're easy to identify in our system. Some people have IDs, like state-issued IDs. Some people have social security cards. All these criteria we can start listing out. We could list out the types of income that they receive, W-2, 1099, K-1, self-employment, creating a matrix of criteria that if we selected a certain subset, we'd be down to a very, very small grouping of people that we'd be focused on, also significantly reducing the complexity and number of rules that are applied. We could start with a very small set of rules, but that's still fully aligned to that higher level goal of taxpayer experience at a do less level. We could even apply that to state, which might actually be important when we're trying to reduce taxpayer effort, because let's say we get the federal piece figured out, I still have to go to TurboTax or wherever to enter all my state stuff. I might as well just do the federal at the same time anyway. We got to handle state at the same time. We could break down each state and start with a small population of very limited criteria. MVP, we could start with just a smaller technology experiment on this. Like, let's say we deploy just a phone app that goes out to people to allow them to submit taxes, and then we eliminate the complexity with integrating with the current systems. We get enough interface information into it to feed the phone app, but when the data comes back, we have a team of people that are keying it in at first, right? We're starting small. We're not tackling the full complexity of the problem. Lots of ways that could probably be done, and I'm not an expert on all the different possibilities, but teams of highly skilled technologists will be amazing at figuring that out. So this is, I mean, the basis of the 3 do less concepts that I have to present. And again, I think these are all very straightforward, and the challenge is mostly around actually doing it and agreeing to try it and experimenting with it. All right, so let's rewrite that strategic plan for the IRS. And if I were to rewrite it, I would just make one page, and it would be step 1, find a leader with the highest authority level possible who buys into these principles and is willing to protect the team and be an advocate for the team and really has authority over the organization to get the team whatever they need in order to make progress towards their outcome. With that leader, we decide on a vision and a set of outcomes, maybe something like I showed earlier, and we communicate that to the organization. We ensure that it's clear that this is the focus. This is what we'll be working on, and all other things that are happening may need to be second priority to doing this work. We go out and we get the best team possible that money can buy. And we've got $80 billion, so hopefully that's a pretty decent team. We get technologists. Many people that are probably in this room would be fantastic at joining a team such as this. We also invite the current state folks and offer an invitation to say, we need people on this team that have an understanding of our archaeological dig site. Who wants to be a participant in this activity? And we create that group of people that we're going to hold responsible for achieving these outcomes. And we put them in cucumber water. And that leader that we identify is responsible for ensuring that the brine does not get in. We set success criteria. With that team, we identify a first do less experiment. So let's say it is something like, we're going to create a phone app. We have everyone's information. We're going to email this very small subset of the population, and we're gonna say, hey, do you want to try taxes out a different way this year? Yes or no, invitation based, right? We tell them, here's all the information we have on you. We have everything from their income. We have their filed taxes from W-2s. Maybe we start with only people that have W-2 income. And we say, here's how much you owe in taxes. Hit this button if you want to pay it. Let us know if you have a change. Under 5 minutes, right? So we set a success criteria of we quickly and efficiently get the tax information and either a refund or payment from these people in, let's say, under 5 minutes. Do it better, have that criteria clear. We do that very quickly for a small set of population. We have our team that observes and interacts with those people, learns and starts to find out about what works for that. Where do we miss data? How do we need to do this in a way that's more equitable? And starts to really understand what's necessary to truly make this happen for just a small set of people, so that when we start expanding it, we're incorporating that learning into the next phase and the next phase and the next phase. And we continue to do this iteratively until we've completed all of the direct file. And I would assume as we're doing this also, we're learning about the other outcomes, and we're starting to spin off other activities that are creating more teams and more value and building this out. So new plan for the IRS, right here, one page, less than $15 million.